Next, in a bombshell announcement in Washington today, Arlen Specter, for 30 years, has been a Republican senator from Pennsylvania. Now, he says he's a Democrat. Specter conceded today his low standing among Republicans in Pennsylvania imperiled his chances for re-election, but his switch puts Democrats within one vote of having a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. Here's Jonathan Karl.
To Arlen Specter's Senate colleagues, this was a political earthquake.
I have found myself increasingly at odds with the Republican philosophy and more in line with the philosophy of the Democratic Party.
Specter said he had been driven out by the right wing of the Republican Party.
They don't make any bones about their willingness to lose the general election. If they can purify the party, there ought to be a rebellion. There ought to be an uprising.
By switching parties, Specter puts Democrats a whisker away from a 60-vote supermajority. That would make it impossible for Republicans on their own to block anything. Shell-shocked Republican senators called the move devastating.
But it certainly sets up the potential for the majority, if it chooses to run roughshod over the majority, over the minority, to eliminate checks and balances and the kind of restraint that Americans have historically wanted.
In a blistering response, Republican Party Chairman Michael Steele declared Specter, quote, left to further his personal political interests. Specter had outraged Pennsylvania Republicans by voting in favor of President Obama's stimulus plan and was facing a tough primary challenge from former Congressman Pat Toomey. He candidly acknowledged polls showed he'd lose the Republican primary.
Not prepared to have that record decided by that jury, the Pennsylvania Republican primary electorate.
Specter is a moderate, but in nearly 30 years as a Republican senator, he often clashed with Democrats, taking on Anita Hill during the Clarence Thomas confirmation battle a generation ago, and on most issues, voting with Republicans.
I voted 10,000 times. I don't expect everybody to agree with all my votes. I don't agree with them all myself at this point.
President Obama told Specter today he was, quote, thrilled to have him. More importantly, the president promised to campaign for Specter next year in Pennsylvania. Charlie?
Jonathan Karl reporting from Capitol Hill, and George Stephanopoulos, the host of This Week, is joining us now. George, this was a shocker. People in Washington were very surprised. Across the country were very surprised. But should they have been so surprised?
Maybe not, Charlie. You know, key Democrats like the Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid and Vice President Joe Biden have been working on Arlen Specter since 2004 when he almost lost the Republican primary. This came down to hard politics, Charlie. Specter calculated that he couldn't win the primary in Pennsylvania as a Republican. He couldn't win the general election as an independent, so his only choice to hold the seat was to become a Democrat.
And as John reported, this puts the Democrats very close to having that supermajority in the Senate. If Al Franken gets the Minnesota seat, and he seems to still be leading, that would give them 60 votes. And that could have a real impact on policy, could it not?
It could, Charlie. This is good news for the Democrats. But as one Republican reminded me, 60 seats is not 60 votes. Specter is an idiosyncratic guy. Even though he told the president he would support his agenda, his vote on every issue is not guaranteed. And there are a lot of conservative and moderate Democrats who are resisting President Obama's agenda on big issues like health care and energy.
But bottom line, George, can you be a Republican for 30 years, 5 elections in Pennsylvania, and then all of a sudden say, never mind?
Well, you can do it. We'll see if the voters buy it.
And we'll find that out when he runs for re-election. George Stephanopoulos.